Welcome to the Papyrus Global TV. My name is Christiana Babayo. The world finds itself at a critical intersection of diplomacy, economic recalibration, political tension, and institutional accountability. Here are our top 5 global headlines. Gaza war death toll estimated significantly higher than previously reported. President Donald Trump convenes inaugural Board of Peace meeting in Washington. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu and Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz discuss expanded cooperation. U.S. lawmakers introduce comprehensive aviation safety reform bill. U.S. policy shift signals removal of guardrails from proposed Saudi nuclear cooperation deal. Let us begin. A new independent study released today suggests that the death toll in Gaza during the first 15 months of conflict may be significantly higher than previously reported figures. Researchers conducting demographic and statistical analysis argue that indirect casualties, including those caused by infrastructure collapse, medical shortages, and displacement, may have substantially increased total fatalities. If validated, the findings could intensify international pressure for humanitarian accountability and renewed ceasefire negotiations. The implications extend beyond numbers. Casualty figures influence diplomatic negotiations, war crime investigations, aid allocation, and international court proceedings. The study is expected to reignite debate at the United Nations and among regional powers seeking a durable political solution. U.S. President Donald Trump today hosted an inaugural Board of Peace meeting in Washington, bringing together selected international leaders for discussions centered on global conflict mediation. The event, framed as an alternative diplomatic platform, emphasizes negotiation over prolonged military engagement. However, controversy emerged as Belarus reported visa challenges preventing its participation, raising questions about inclusivity and diplomatic neutrality. Observers say the initiative represents a strategic attempt by Washington to reshape global peace architecture outside traditional multilateral frameworks. Whether the initiative evolves into a durable diplomatic institutions remain to be seen. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu held high-level discussions today with Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz, focusing on expanded bilateral cooperation in security, renewable energy, and infrastructure. The talks reportedly addressed energy transitions, partnerships, industrial development support, and regional security collaboration in West Africa. Germany remains a key European economic powerhouse, and strengthened ties may position Nigeria strategically within Europe-Africa trade corridors. The diplomatic engagement underscores Nigeria's growing geopolitical relevance and Europe's increasing interest in African economic partnerships. In response to a recent fatal aircraft collision, U.S. lawmakers introduced a sweeping aviation safety reform bill today. The proposed legislation seeks stricter airspace monitoring, upgraded collision avoidance technologies, enhanced pilot certification standards, and expanded federal oversight mechanisms. Aviation experts argue that while commercial air travel remains statistically safe, evolving air traffic density and private aviation growth demand updated regulatory safeguards. The bill may set global aviation standards if adopted, influencing regulatory bodies worldwide. A policy document released today indicates that the United States may remove certain non-proliferation guardrails previously attached to a proposed civilian nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia. The move signals a potential recalibration of Middle East policy, likely aimed at strengthening strategic alliances amid shifting regional power balances. Critics warn that relaxing restrictions could complicate global non-proliferation frameworks. Supporters argue the agreement could strengthen diplomatic leverage and regional stability. The development will likely trigger global scrutiny from nuclear oversight institutions and allied governments. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) has confirmed that it will release a detailed review of United States fiscal, monetary and trade policies next week, a report that global markets are watching with intense interest. The United States remains the world's largest economy and the issuer of the dominant global reserve currency. Therefore, any IMF assessment of U.S. deficit sustainability, debt servicing projections, or tariff frameworks carries significant global implications. According to preliminary indications, the review will examine federal deficit trajectory and debt to GDP sustainability, the long-term impact of tariff policies on global supply chains, inflation management and Federal Reserve coordination, spillover effects on emerging markets. Developing economies are particularly sensitive to U.S. fiscal policy shifts. Rising U.S. interest rates, for example, often strengthen the dollar, increasing debt burdens for countries with dollar-denominated loans. Financial analysts suggest that if the IMF signals concerns about deficit sustainability, bonds markets could react with volatility. Conversely, a stable outlook could reinforce global investor confidence. In essence, this report is not simply about America, it is about the global financial system's equilibrium. In North Africa, Tunisia's political trajectory has come under renewed international scrutiny after a lawmaker was sentenced to 8 months in prison for remarks mocking President Kais Saied. Human rights organizations and international observers argue that the ruling may reflect a broader tightening of political space and shrinking tolerance for dissent. Tunisia was once hailed as the Arab Spring's most promising democratic experiment. However, recent constitutional changes and executive consolidations of power have raised questions about institutional checks and balances. The imprisonment of an elected representative over political expression may influence Tunisia's diplomatic relations with Western partners, international development funding, foreign investment risk assessments. Critics argue that political stability cannot come at the expense of democratic pluralism. Supporters of the government maintain that legal boundaries must be respected in public discourse. Tunisia now stands at a crossroads between centralized governance and participatory democracy. Nigeria's national currency, the naira, has shown renewed strength in foreign exchange markets, reflecting improved forex inflows and regulatory measures aimed at stabilizing the exchange system. Policy adjustments by the Central Bank of Nigeria, including efforts to narrow parallel market spreads and increase transparency in currency allocation, appear to be restoring cautious investor confidence. Currency stabilization is vital for Nigeria's broader economic outlook. A stronger naira helps reduce imported inflation, stabilize fuel and prices, improve investor sentiment, strengthen fiscal planning. However, economists caution that currency performance must be supported by structural reforms, including export diversification, improved industrial productivity, and fiscal discipline. Short-term stabilization is encouraging, but sustainable economic transformation remains the long-term objective. In a development with major implications for global pharmaceutical innovation, BioNTech has filed a patent infringement lawsuit against Moderna concerning next-generation mRNA vaccine technology. The dispute centers on intellectual property rights related to advanced vaccine design platforms developed during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. This legal battle may influence future vaccine research collaborations, licensing agreements across biotech firms, global vaccine pricing structures, intellectual property enforcement standards. The pharmaceutical industry relies heavily on patent protection to fund high-risk research and development. However, critics argue that excessive patent rigidity can limit access to life-saving technologies. The outcome of this case could reshape innovation incentives in global public health. The British Broadcasting Corporation (BBC) has announced new directors for its entertainment and factual divisions as part of a broader strategic restructuring. The move comes amid intense competition from digital streaming platforms and shifting global media consumption patterns. Public broadcasters worldwide are facing similar challenges: audience fragmentation, decline in traditional advertising revenues, competition from global streaming giants, rising content production costs. The BBC's restructuring signals an attempt to modernize content strategy while maintaining its public service mandate. The question facing legacy media institutions globally is whether they can successfully balance tradition, independence, and digital innovation. Belarus has publicly stated that it was unable to participate in the Washington Board of Peace meeting due to visa complications. The diplomatic disagreement has sparked debate about inclusivity in international peace-building initiative. In global diplomacy, participation signals legitimacy. Exclusion, whether intentional or administrative, can create geopolitical friction. The issue highlights a broad challenge. Can emerging diplomatic platforms operate independently of traditional geopolitical rivalries? The Winter Olympic Games in Italy continue to draw global audiences, showcasing elite athlete performance amid ongoing geopolitical tensions. Sport remains one of the few international arenas where political rivals compete under shared rules and institutional oversight. Beyond medals, the Games serve as platforms for soft diplomacy, economic stimulators for host regions, symbols of global cooperation. Even in politically divided times, international sports continue to function as a stabilizing cultural force. Global shipping insurance premiums have risen due to heightened security risk in key maritime corridors. The increase affects trade costs worldwide, influencing the pricing of consumer goods, energy shipments, and raw materials. Maritime routes are critical arteries of the global economy. Disruptions can increase delivery timelines, raise freight costs, contribute to inflationary pressures. Shipping stability is increasingly intertwined with geopolitical security. International humanitarian organizations are calling for expanded funding amid rising displacement crisis and climate-driven emergencies. Aid agencies warn that current funding levels are insufficient to meet escalating needs in conflict-affected and climate-vulnerable regions. Underfunded humanitarian operations can exacerbate instability, migration pressures, and regional insecurity. The global aid system now faces a sustainability challenge as crises multiply simultaneously. Global financial markets closed cautiously today as investors balance geopolitical uncertainties with economic policy developments. Equity indices showed modest fluctuations, while bonds yield reflected cautious positioning ahead of upcoming fiscal announcements. Market sentiments remain sensitive to U.S. economic policy signals, Middle East developments, European regulatory shifts, commodity price stability. In an interconnected world, investor confidence depends as much on political clarity as economic data. And that concludes Global Briefing on the Papyrus Global TV, Friday 20th February 2026. From Washington to Tunis, from Abuja to Berlin, from financial markets to humanitarian corridors. Today's developments demonstrate once again that governance, economics, diplomacy, and security are deeply interconnected. At the Papyrus Global TV, we remain committed to delivering fact-based, analytical journalism that informs leadership, strengthens institutions, and connects Africa to the world. For continuous updates, exclusive governance analysis, and breaking international developments, visit thepapyrusdaily.com. Follow us across all social media platforms. Subscribe and stay informed. This is the Papyrus Global TV, informing leaders, shaping conversations, and connecting Africa to the world. I am your host, Christiana Babayo. Bye for now and stay globally aware.